The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose. In the heart of a sprawling refugee camp along the border of South Sudan, life stirred gently, cooking fires crackled, plastic water containers clanked, and distant laughter of children echoed through the dust. Amid this rhythmic chaos, 16-year-old Achen adjusted the faded scarf wrapped around her hair and stepped out of the tarpaulin shelter she shared with her grandmother. Today, like every day, she had one mission: bring joy to children whose lives had been marred by conflict. Achen found her usual spot under the neem tree near the temporary school tents. A group of younger children had already gathered, their eyes wide with expectation. She clapped her hands rhythmically, a signal for quiet. With a wide smile, she began to tell the story of the leopard and the clever hare, her voice rising and falling with drama. The children giggled, gasped, and clapped, the trauma of war momentarily forgotten. Achen's gift for storytelling was a miracle in a place where hope was often scarce. She believed that stories could heal, could mend broken hearts and remind them all of who they once were, and who they could still be. Watching from a distance was Deng, tall and lanky, with skin like polished mahogany and a quiet strength that made him seem older than his 17 years. A former dancer before the war scattered his family, Deng found solace in movement. Where Achen weaved tales with words, he told stories with his feet, his hands, his breath. Today he waited for Achen's final lines before stepping forward. As her story reached its triumphant end, he spun into the open space with graceful energy, his feet kicking up dust and hearts. The children squealed with delight. Achen watched him, her smile deepening, not just from the joy he brought, but from something tender she hadn't yet named. Deng's feet moved like the wind, light, precise, and expressive. He spun in tight circles, then slowed into long gliding steps. The children clapped and mimicked his movements, their bare feet kicking up little clouds of dust. His body told stories of ancient warriors, of graceful cranes near the Nile, of mothers dancing in celebration. When he stopped, breathless and grinning, the children broke into applause. Achen stepped forward and gave him a playful bow, which he returned with exaggerated elegance. Their chemistry sparked like firewood catching flame. After the session, Achen and Deng walked together past rows of tents and shelters, greeting elders, dodging wheelbarrows, and nodding respectfully at the women balancing bundles of firewood on their heads. They reached the shade of an old tamarind tree, their unofficial headquarters. There they often brainstormed their next performance: what story to tell, what dance to choreograph, how to make it even better. That day, Deng suggested they incorporate a lullaby his mother used to sing. Achen's eyes lit up with excitement, and soon they were humming melodies, clapping rhythms, and sketching out a fusion of song and story. Though laughter and creativity defined their afternoons, the nights were harder. Achen would lie awake, staring at the canvas roof above her, haunted by memories of gunfire and separation. Deng, in his own shelter, would finger the leather anklet his sister gave him before she disappeared. Their art was more than expression, it was survival. And in each other they found an anchor, a mirror, and a flicker of something deeper than either dared to name. By now the children called them Gogo Achen and Uncle Deng, honorary titles for young people who brought joy in a place where smiles were rationed. Word of their session spread, and children came from distant corners of the camp, braving the scorching sun and broken flip-flops just to listen and dance. A woman from a relief organization noticed the growing crowds and offered a few supplies, some paper, colored chalk, and even an old speaker. For the first time, music floated through the dusty air. That day, Achen told the tale of the greedy crocodile who swallowed the river, and Deng played the crocodile, snapping, stomping, and finally rolling on the ground in mock defeat. The children laughed so hard some fell over. Achen watched Deng, her heart clenching. It wasn't just admiration, it was comfort, admiration, safety. She had lost too much to believe in permanence, but Deng was becoming something dangerously close to it. After the performance they sat side by side, sharing a battered bottle of water. Their arms touched. Deng looked at her, and for a moment the sounds of the camp, crying babies, shouting traders, hammering tent poles, faded away. "You know," he said, "when I dance I forget the war. I forget everything." Achen replied, "When you dance you help us all forget." Then she looked away quickly, scared of what she'd just admitted out loud. That evening the elders hosted a rare storytelling night around a communal fire. Achen and Deng were invited to perform first, a sign of respect that made their hearts swell. Achen opened with a traditional folktale her father once told her, and Deng improvised a dance to match. The flames danced with him, casting long shadows that stretched and swirled with each leap. Afterward they sat quietly among the elders. An old man named Buba began to speak, not of animals or legends but of escape routes, gunmen, and betrayals. For the first time the children heard stories without happy endings. A girl sitting near Achen began to cry. Deng's hand found hers under the blanket. Walking back to their tents, Deng whispered, "Do you think our stories matter with so much pain around us?" Achen stopped, eyes fierce. "They matter because there's pain. If we don't remember joy, they've won." Her words hit Deng like a drumbeat in his chest. In that moment, under the faint stars of a battered sky, he realized he loved her. The rains came early that year. One afternoon, while rehearsing a story dance routine, the wind picked up and sand whipped through the air. Then the skies broke open. The children scattered, squealing, and Achen and Deng grabbed the chalks and speaker before they could be ruined. Laughing, soaked to the bone, they found shelter under a disused UNHCR truck canopy. Their laughter faded into soft breathing. Water dripped rhythmically from the metal above. Deng took Achen's hand and rested it between his palms. "You're my best story," he said quietly. Her heart pounded. "Then dance it," she replied. He stood, and with the rain drumming all around, he danced for her, slow, smooth, deliberate. Each step whispered what his mouth could not. When he finished, she walked to him and kissed him, briefly, tenderly. They didn't speak about it. Not then. The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was sacred. The kind that speaks without sound. They walked back hand in hand, the mud clinging to their feet, their hearts lighter than ever. A week later, a bus arrived carrying new refugees. Among them was a girl named Lul, tall and graceful, who used to perform in traditional dance troupes in Juba. She quickly joined the afternoon sessions, her style refined and confident. The children adored her. Achen noticed Deng watching Lul's footwork with quiet admiration. Something uneasy twisted in her stomach. One day Lul suggested a duet with Deng. They rehearsed behind the food distribution tent, and Achen saw them laughing, Deng correcting her step with a gentle touch. Achen felt something she hadn't expected, jealousy. She tried to bury it, to remind herself this wasn't about love, it was about survival, about art. But it gnawed at her. That evening, Deng found her sketching storyboards in the sand. He sat beside her. "Lul's talented," Achen said without looking up. "She is," he admitted. "But she doesn't know my stories like you do." Achen bit her lip, smiling despite herself. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're my compass, Achen. No matter who joins, I dance for you." And just like that, the knot in her heart loosened. A UN official visited the camp with forms and folders. Relocation interviews would begin soon. Selected families and individuals might be placed in countries like Canada, Norway, or Australia. The air buzzed with anticipation and anxiety. Achen's grandmother urged her to fill the form. Deng's guardian did the same. But no one knew who would be accepted, or where they'd be sent. Deng and Achen sat beneath their tamarind tree, staring at the blank forms. "If they send you to Norway and me to Australia," Deng said. "Then we build boats," Achen joked, though her voice cracked. She folded her form in half. "I only want to go if you're going too." The next day they helped the children write their own stories on donated paper. "We'll send these stories into the world," Deng said, "like birds looking for new skies." But inside he feared the sky might split them apart. As relocation interviews began, the mood in the camp shifted. Families whispered anxiously about interviews and destinations. Some walked with new hope, others with dread. Achen and Deng kept their usual routine with the children, but their laughter felt tighter now, edged with the fear of goodbye. During one session, Deng paused mid-dance, losing his rhythm. Achen covered for him, launching into a funny tale about a monkey who couldn't remember its own name. The children laughed, but Deng just sat down, burying his face in his hands. Afterward he confessed to her, "I can't dance like nothing's changing. What if we don't end up in the same place? What if everything breaks apart?" Achen took his face in her hands, gently lifting it to hers. "Then we remember. We remember every step, every story. And no matter where they send us, we tell those stories again." She placed his hand over her heart. "Because this is home now." Deng's interview came first. He wore a clean shirt and borrowed trousers that didn't quite fit. The UN worker asked about his family, his interests, his dreams. He spoke about his dancing, about Achen, about how they use stories to heal others. The worker smiled kindly and scribbled notes. Later, Achen waited her turn, her fingers trembling. Inside the interview tent, she sat across from a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. "Why do you want relocation?" the woman asked. Achen hesitated. "I want to become a teacher," she said finally. "And I want to keep telling stories for those who've lost theirs." When asked where she'd prefer to go, she paused. "Wherever Deng is. If that's not possible, then somewhere I can write him letters every day." That night, under their tamarind tree, they didn't speak much. They just held each other. Some decisions were too big for words. A few families began receiving acceptance letters. One by one, tents were packed, farewells said, and buses departed. The children clung to Achen and Deng, terrified they would be next. To calm them, Achen created a new story about a bird and a fish who promised to find each other, no matter how wide the ocean. Deng danced the bird's flight and the fish's swirling path. The performance was somber but beautiful. Tears glistened in adult eyes. Elders nodded solemnly. That night, someone began singing near the central fire and others joined in. Songs of leaving, songs of return, songs of hope. Achen and Deng danced not for joy, but for remembrance. When the music ended, they sat quietly. "If you leave first," Deng said, "wait for me." Achen nodded. "And if you leave first, I'll find you." The night swallowed their promise like a vow sealed in the stars. Tension grew as rumors spread. Deng had been accepted for relocation to Canada. Achen's name wasn't on any list. Deng tried to pretend he hadn't heard, but the news carved silence between them. They still performed, still gathered the children, but the space between their fingers widened, the pauses in their conversations deepened. Achen tried to smile as he danced, but her stories lost their spark. One afternoon she didn't show up at all. Deng found her later by the river's edge, throwing stones into the water. "You should go," she said quietly. "You have a future there." "I have a future with you," he replied, but she shook her head. "You don't know that." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You'll dance in places I can't follow. Don't wait for me." Deng stared at her, aching. He didn't know how to fight for something that was slowly disappearing. The camp organized a farewell ceremony for those leaving. Deng was among them. The children insisted on one final performance from Gogo Achen and Uncle Deng. Achen tried to refuse, but the pleading faces softened her resolve. She wrote a new story, A Phoenix Rising from Ash, and asked Deng to dance it. Their final performance was electric. Achen's voice quivered but never broke. Deng's movements flowed with intensity and sorrow. At the end, they stood in the center, surrounded by applause, and bowed together. Then Achen stepped forward and whispered, "This is not the end." That night she gave him a small bundle, a leather notebook filled with stories and sketches. "To remember me," she said. Deng touched her cheek. "As if I could ever forget." The next morning the bus arrived. Deng hugged the children, his limbs stiff with emotion. When he turned to find Achen, she was under their tree, arms folded, face unreadable. "No tears," she said, managing a smile. "Phoenixes don't cry." He laughed, choked. "Only the ones who fly too far." They embraced like people trying to press a lifetime into one moment. "Write me," she whispered. "Write every week. Or I'll write you into a story where you forget everything, even how to dance." He nodded. "And I'll write you into every step." Then he boarded. The engine roared. The camp grew smaller behind the dusty windows. The tamarind tree faded from view. Achen stood alone beneath it, one hand on her heart. In Canada, Deng faced cold air and colder silence. But he danced in community halls, in refugee centers, in school gyms. He mailed Achen letters, long ones full of sketches and dance ideas, poems and awkward jokes. She read each one like scripture, laughing, crying, replying with stories of her own. Months passed. Achen's name finally appeared on a list. She would go to Uganda, not Canada. It wasn't what she hoped, but it was a start. In her final days in the camp, she trained 2 girls to continue the storytelling circle. She left her chalk and stories behind, but took her notebook, and every letter Deng had sent. When she arrived in Uganda, she found a dance group in the camp and began teaching storytelling. Her name spread. One day she performed The Phoenix before a group of visiting aid workers. Among them was a filmmaker from Toronto. He watched her, captivated. Months later, Achen stepped off a plane in Toronto, nervous, shivering, holding her notebook like a lifeline. The filmmaker had helped arrange a performance residency for her. Her first event, a cultural youth night where local dancers and storytellers would collaborate. She didn't know Deng would be there. He stood at the back of the room, arms folded, wearing the same leather anklet. When she stepped onto the stage and saw him, she froze. He smiled, lifted one hand, and tapped his chest where his heart beat fast. After the show, they found each other in a quiet hallway. Neither spoke. They just hugged, long deep trembling. Achen whispered, "You waited." Deng replied, "I danced through every letter." And so, in a country far from home, in a building filled with music and memories, they began again. Two phoenixes rising not from ash, but from each other's fire.